This meeting is being recorded.
And let me start the recording on my, well, actually, I'm going to start the Nikon when I start demoing. Don't need to start the Nikon now. Did you have any questions about the last demo, right? Where I was painting on the girl with the colorful striped shirt. And if you want, since we just have you, and you wanted to take a cell phone snap of your painting and upload, if it was easy for you to upload to your computer, we could look at it if you want.
Sure. I'm not sure how I would do.
I should have like flagged you down when I sent you the email. Like,
yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, that would have been good, but you know, I don't always think ahead. You know, I'm looking to think ahead. But if you don't, you know, if it's not convenient,
I don't know how to do that.
Well, it would mean that you would take your painting, put it someplace in the room that has better light than, like, more or less even light, if you can conjure that. Take a picture of it with your phone. Send it to yourself. I mean, are you on your laptop?
Yeah.
Okay. So then you would send it to yourself, your email. And then it will show, then you would pick up your email on your laptop and download it to your laptop, right? And then you would open it, and then I would enable you to share. It sounds like a lot of steps, but I think you're familiar with most of them, right? So then I would enable you to share here, and then you would share it with me, and then we would talk about it. I know, a lot of steps. Even if you can snap a picture of it, like right there on your couch, you know.
Yeah, okay.
I'll think ahead better next time.
Oh, that's fine. I mean, yeah, I could have tried to think about questions.
Right.
Well,
you can think about it while we're talking about other stuff too.
Sure, yeah.
Really, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm okayly happy with
yeah
the progress. I think my biggest issue was I overworked it on one side and kind of, yeah, doesn't look good on the one side that I reactivated the paint, and yeah. But then the other issue I was having was just I kept ending up, and I'm sure this is just like a practice thing of, I kept ending up having to mix more color and then not being able to mix and to match it, you know. So like I ended up with more different colors on her face than
you intended,
wanted. Yeah.
And you know, part of that how the color shifts. So you're mixing a color, it looks like it's what you want, then you put it down,
Yeah.
it's not quite what you want, right?
Yeah, some of that, and then some of just not maybe knowing the like mix it, you know, should I be adding yellow or orange, kind of, so it's a little bit of a hit miss guessing game.
Sure. And I think that a lot of that is going to be experience.
Yeah.
And asking those questions like, well, what happened? Well, I'm going to add yellow to this part, and then I'm going to add orange over to this part. And what is going to be matching what I want more closely?
Mm-hmm.
And then putting a test down on your painting, because you can always paint over that, right? So you can put a test down. And I think that when you're watching me demo, that you're seeing me adjust, right? So I make a mixture, I put it down on my painting, I go, oh, too fill in the blank, right? Too dark, too light, too red, green, yellow, right? Too, you know, any of these things. And then I adjust the mixture, I put it down again, and then I adjust it again. And I think painting is all of these adjustments, including when I'm teaching, painting from life, it's just a lot of adjustments.
Yeah.
As I put a color down, it's often not quite right until you make those adjustments. And I think that a big trying to think of the right word, a big goal for people when they're painting from life, for instance, in my portrait class or in my figure class, or out when they're painting alla prima, not alla prima, plein air, right?
Mm.
They're painting the landscape and they're trying to match what they see. And there are a lot of tricks and techniques that people try so that they can make better judgments more quickly when they're painting from life, including matching the color of their panel or canvas to the color of their palette and matching the light, So artists do a lot of different things so that they have, so they make it easier for themselves to mix a color and have it be the color that they want, when they put it on their painting, while making fewer adjustments, because that, when you're painting from life, a lot of times you have a time limit.
Right.
The fruit will rot over the course of, days. The person is only going to sit there for a limited amount of time. The landscape the light is going to change on the landscape. The landscape's going to change over the course of days. So they have a limited amount of time. They want to make those decisions quickly. If they can be more accurate, they want to enable themselves to be more accurate. So my whole point to this is saying that matching the color is it's something that's hard for most artists, and there's something they have to work at, and doing it while making fewer adjustments is sometimes a goal, but for the most part, there's adjustments that you have to make. So it's not uncommon to go, I mixed this color, it looks pretty good, I'm going to put it down. Oh, it's too dark, light, red, green, yellow. I need to add fill in the blank, right? I need to lighten it. I need to darken it. Oh, I lightened it with white. Now it's not quite right. What is it? It's too cool usually, because you add white and it cools the mixture. Then you need to warm up the mixture again by adding red, yellow, orange usually, or brown, right? If it's darker. So brown's already neutralized, but it's warmer than, blue. So you have to decide what to add, and you can use your mental color wheel in your head, right? Complement, but more, the warm spectrum, right? Or I don't want the complement because I want it to be more intense, but I need to have it be warmer. My warm colors are red, yellow, orange. So what do I add? How much do I add? And you're going to be testing it more and more. You're going to be testing it maybe more than me, but as you get more experienced, you won't have to test it as, you won't have to make as many changes. But making adjustments is normal.
Yeah.
And painting over your paint, the test that you make is something we can do with gouache and with oil and with acrylic.
Yeah.
Less so with watercolor, right? So what you're experiencing is normal. And with experience, I think that you're going to make the mixtures you want more quickly.
Yeah.
What about brush strokes? Does it make sense to you when when I'm using a dry brush to kind of make a tone, like, I'm dry brushing over a background color and I'm making kind of half tone by doing that. And then sometimes I'm using a thin mixture to brush quickly over a background color to make a half tone. So there's different ways of doing that. And then, and by doing that, I don't necessarily have to mix the half tone color, because I'm basically using kind of a shortcut, right? Right. So I just wanted to see if you had any specific questions that I can help guide you with, answer. and we will. I thought we'd look at some of my work. I have some paintings, gouache paintings here that I've gathered together. We could take a look at because I've shown you other artists' work.
Yeah.
And so we can look at
my cat.
Yeah.
I do have the picture pulled up on my
Oh, good.
laptop screen. I don't know how to get it.
All right. So you have it on your laptop, on your desktop.
Right.
Let me see. Hang on. No, not this.
Oh, and I do have I did have a one question about tracing. I could ask in a second.
All right. So I just made it so that we can more than one person can share. All right. Let me see what this is. How many? Multiple. All participants can share. All right. Do you have a share button at the bottom of your window there, your Zoom window?
Yeah.
The green share button. You're going to press that button. And then you're going to have a field of thumbnails come up that show all the windows that are open on your laptop. And among them will be your image.
Oh.
Right. And then you just click on it.
Okay.
And then press share, I think. Yes. All right. You start double click to, oh, there you are. Awesome. Okay. I see your image. Great.
Okay, wait. I can't see my image.
You can. You should be able to find it if you, and you know, if you move things around on your desktop, you should be able to see.
Yeah, so I see a tiny little thumbnail.
Well, the one I have looks like it's about like 3 by 4 inches on my desktop. That's the image size that I have that I'm looking at.
Okay.
If you.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you can see it, then because mine's tiny, but I can still. Can you see the mouse? My mouse?
No.
To like point out? No.
You mean your pointer? Are you using the cursor?
Yeah, like if I were to point at a section of it.
Yeah, I don't see it, and I should. So if you have, you should be able to, you know, if you move stuff around on your desktop, you should have the image the way I'm seeing it. Let's see, Lauren's screen. Is that what I'm seeing here? Fit to window. Okay, 50%. So I could actually open this bigger. Original size. Ah, there we go. Do you see that? I just made this bigger. I made your painting bigger on my screen. Let's see, how do I move this thing around? Or if I go back to, there we go, 50%. You should be able to have your image larger on your desktop and to be able to point to stuff. Did I lose you?
No, sorry. I just can't.
You just can't find it?
That's so funny.
Because I have your screen here.
It's just a little tiny thumbnail on my screen, but
are you able to double click on it and see if it'll open or?
Well, so
if you move your Zoom.
I did just see it. It just showed a little notation thing that said I have low bandwidth. I don't know if that has anything to do with it.
Okay, so maybe you don't have enough bars or something.
Yeah, but basically well, I guess if I'm looking at it from here, though, yeah, it looks like it's so the right side you can see there's all these blotches and the chin got screwed up because I lost. You know, I reactivated the base, so then I went in with lighter, and it just
got it. Right. So you have the overall color very close, right? You know, you have an overall brown flesh tone. One thing you're lacking is a lot of warmth, right? So, you know, the area like around the bridge of the nose, you've got a little bit more warmth. I'm pointing, but I know you don't see my cursor, you know. So I basically got to say, yeah. So I basically have to say, you know, talk about where I'm looking. You know, I see where you around the chin, which is actually in shadow, right? And underneath the lower lip is also in shadow. Like you basically reactivated the paint underneath and brought that up. So being able to, you can actually reestablish those darks if you want to by mixing some more dark.
Mm-hmm.
And you can either use dry brush or you can use the thinned paint, like a glaze, to reestablish the darks if you want to around her chin, like, you know, around here, her chin and under her lip, like in the photo or closer to what's in the photo. And then you can also use, I used orange, basically cadmium orange. I darkened it a little bit, so it's not bright cadmium orange, but it's pretty warm. And I basically put in those warms here. When you look in the photo, she's got, you know, warms all around her nose here on the sides, you know, and I put those in too and left, you know. So what you're doing here is you're grappling with how to handle the paint, right? Here without reactivating what's underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And without
Well, and part of, yeah.
And it's something that's going to come with some experience.
Yeah, some of the so like you can't really, I don't know if you can see, but like the cooler, like peachier color I put down after. So I had kind of overworked in general. Like I was like happy, excited about it, and it was yeah. Oh, whoa. And
yeah.
so I think the original color was more of that bridge of the nose,
warm
around the mouth color. Yeah. And then I started going too far and then started putting in more of that peachy color that that's where I lost that warm color and I couldn't remix it. Yeah.
It's really common when I'm teaching figure painting and I'm teaching portrait painting from life. The big dilemma, a big dilemma for people is to be able to make flesh tone warm enough. And especially now, it's even more of an issue when you have somebody who's a Caucasian because their flesh tone is lighter in value. And so people who are painting are trying to make flesh tone that's light in value, right? So like when the light's hitting me, right? Flesh tone, while making it warm enough because they're making it light by adding white.
Right.
White cools it down and it looks chalky or it looks even gray. And so then they look like they're painting a corpse because it's like it's bloodless. Right. And so learning to add enough warms and how to do it is a big skill for people. And that's what you're encountering here, even though she has a darker skin tone, which makes it actually easier to add warms. Because what happens is, when I add, I lost the image. What happened here? Well, my image went away. When I add, if I want to have a light skin tone and I add red to it or I add orange to it, it can darken the value of my mixture. And so, you know, being able to add enough, there it is. There, you're back. The image is back. Being able to add enough warms and, you know, it's something that's a skill. So it's not just you that is struggling with this, but you can, just like you can come in here and put in darks again. You can also make a red orange color and maybe add some brown so it's not too bright. And you can use it as a glaze. And you can also, or you can use it as a dry brush and drop it in over these brown tones to warm them up. So you can still go at this, you know, it's not over. With gouache, it's definitely not over. With oil or acrylic, you would be painting over your previous work. But here with gouache, you can just alter what's here because you can reactivate it. So If you want to make more, you know, have more of an effort here to warm it up, you can. If you want to darken it up, you can. I think you did pretty well with the shirt. I see here you've got some dry brush, right? How it's all broken up. Oh, see on the arm. Sorry, I'm pointing, but I have to remember you can't see my cursor. So on the looking at her arm with the shirt, you've got some dry brush on the right hand side, my right. So you know the viewer's right. The girl's left hand side. There's some as it goes into the darkness. You've got some dry brush. So you're starting to experience how that works. And I like how you've got your stripes. You've left them pretty loose. And you've used opaque paint with the stripes. So you start to experience the difference between using the opaque paint versus using some dry brush and some transparent paint to make your adjustments.
Right.
And I'm going to work on my painting a little bit more, so you'll have a chance to work on yours more. And I'm going to finesse it a little bit more, work on the background, right? See if I can pull it together a little bit more than I have. So you'll get a chance to go at this if you're not completely sick of it yet. So, okay, so I'm going to, you should have a button either at the top or bottom of your screen that will say stop the share. You got it. And so I'm going to share some things here now. Let's see, what am I going to do here? I have Photoshop open. What do I have open? All right. Here, Photoshop. There. So when I open, I have to like move my window back around, you know, and bring it central here. And I have a bunch of files, so this isn't the only file. I'll open. And some of these are older pieces. I can make this bigger. Woo, okay, and scroll around here. Oh, there we go. So I think if I make it bigger, you can see where I've, you know, put in, like there's a light here up against her profile. There's a light there up against her profile. I've kind of outlined her hat and her coat where I wanted. You can see how loose this piece is if I make it bigger, even bigger, right? This isn't the highest resolution file. So starting to see it you know, get soft, right? In spots because I've enlarged it. But I don't think that if you can see, and this isn't that big of a painting. This painting isn't as big as I've got it blown up here. So, but I think you can start to see how the quality of the paint, that I've got soft edges where I've overlapped. And then, you know, I've got hard edges and even not worrying too much about this background up against the edges of the image, right? I've got lights. You can kind of see I have layered over the background, and I'm not too worried about like this kind of stripy quality right here. That's just part of the looseness, right? And I've got several colors that are sort of close together up against this. So I'm not too worried. You know, it's looser than it looks when it's a smaller size. You can see how I've used brush stroke in here, right? Brush strokes there and brush strokes on the horse. Right. So it sort of shows you, and the shadow is pretty loose here and the tail is pretty loose, right? So let me see. No, I don't want that. Sorry, I'm trying to move my window around and I get the zoom bar in there. There we go. Okay. Here's another one, another horsey one. See, I painted a lot of horses. I painted portraits with horses here. So this piece, again, you know, pretty loose up here. You can see that I just left that here. You can see how I went around and I basically adjusted the background a few times. This is a darker color, and then I went over it with a lighter mixture, right? And then here, I think you can see on the horse that I actually glazed a warm over this to warm it up. Because you can see that it's transparent. I don't know how well this file is going to hold if I make it bigger, but yeah, it holds okay.
Yeah, I can see.
Yeah, so you can see that this is there's transparent warm that I put here and here to warm it up. And so I'm using some of the techniques that I've been describing to you. Let's move this up. I want the bar. You know, I moved the window so that I can access this slider bar at the bottom, and then I get all this interference from the zoom. The zoom toolbar comes down, and I'm like, no, toolbar. So there, see, I'm not worrying too much about some of this. You know, I've left it loose. And again, this isn't a really big painting. I think that these two paintings are maybe about in the 11 by 14 inch range, maybe, you know, a little bit taller. So maybe this is something like 11 by 16 or something like that, you know. But you can see that here I've used sort of a transparent cool back here, right? And then I've brought the background, whoops, as I've gotten towards the foreground, I've warmed the background up with this yellow. But, you know, cross-hatching, you know, lots of cross-hatching and stuff like that. See if I can get through all of the friggin' noise there. So more color on this one. And when I talk to you about using brush stroke creatively, I've experimented a lot with brush stroke. And so with gouache, I use brush stroke a lot. And it's interesting and fun for me, right? I've done a lot of it. I played a lot around with brushstroke a lot with gouache because it lends itself to it. It's not as easy with gouache to blend, make a smooth blend, as you found, I think, right? So if I use brushstroke to express form, then I do. And you can see here, I've really, I've used brushstroke to create the illusion of form here. And here on the back, on this green grass, I've used one of my crappy, probably this very same crappy old brush that I have that splits. You know, it's kind of it's kind of wiggly here. It's kind of crappy. It's an old synthetic, and it's kind of mangled. And I let it. I have two of these. This is actually not synthetic, and this one is, and they're pretty mangled and old. And so I actually mix my color, and I leave it. I intentionally let the brush get all split. Right? And then it creates these stripy brush strokes. So I use that. I also will use a fan brush and do the same thing. So one of these fans, I had some mangled, you know, this is a pretty good fan, but I've kept mangled old fan brushes. And even, I don't usually use fan brushes to blend very often. I use them more for a stripy effect here, but I also use them if they're mangled, particularly to make like grass. So I'm less intent on having a smooth gradation with gouache, except, well, I have some tighter work here, so we're going to look at that a little bit. Let me move on over here. All right. So this here, I don't have that much detail, right? It's really shaped. Blow it up a little bit. So it's really shapes against shapes, not too much detail here. The light is pretty subdued. You can see how loose I've left it back here. And I'm still using my big brushes and like that sort of stripy effect, sort of like cross-hatching. The brush does a lot of the work for me. This isn't a very big painting. I think it's about, maybe it's 9 by 12-ish, right? Kind of. So, by blowing it up, I'm showing you kind of I'm letting you see underneath the skirts, so to speak, right? So these individuals are quite small. So what we're seeing here is big. Probably these two horses are about maybe they're an inch and a half by 2 inches in the actual painting. So this image here that I'm showing you is quite big. It's probably about 3.5 by 5, right? So considerably bigger than the original. So you can see, but so I the piece is much smaller and looks tighter. But I think you can kind of see how I've layered this violet over the green. So I painted this kind of putty green down in the background initially. I'm going, oh, here's the background trees, right? And then here's the sky, right? And then, as I'm working and putting in the foreground, I've gone, oh, that background green is maybe too dark in value. Maybe it's too, even though it's sort of a putty gray green, it's still too intense. So I mixed a violet here, kind of this sort of violet, and I went splooge and I painted it over the background green without lifting it too much. And I left some of this texture because I want that feeling of foliage, right? So their slight variations aren't a problem. And I think you can also see here in the foreground, where's my cursor? Where'd you go? Lost my cursor. There we are. Scroll this down. I'm working this foreground a lot like the backgrounds. The background that I did on the tulips, for instance. And like I'm bringing up, I've got this lighter color here. It's sort of it's lighter and has more white in it. It's cooler. And then I come in, I'm like, that's too cool. So I come in with this yellow, probably a mixture of yellow with maybe a little bit of orange, I'm not sure. And I kind of plopped it over that background. And then sometime in the foreground here, I probably reactivated what's underneath a little bit and pulled it up. And I liked it sort of streaky like that, and I left it. So the things that that we're talking about, I've used some of that. Here's the dry brush in the shadow, right? But again, this is small. What have I got? That okay. I'm going to open up a few more. Let me see if I can open up a few more images, and if you can see them without me having to reshare, so to speak. What do I want? This. How about that? Come on. How about that? Come on, honey bun. There. Oh, this image doesn't work. Oh, there you are. There you are. Nice. Okay. Can you see this still when I brought up the images? Okay, so I don't have to like reshare it. So this is a sketch for a painting. A lot of times I use gouache for preliminary paintings, preliminary sketches for a bigger painting. And a lot of times the sketch comes out better than the painting does. So this, you can see how loose this is. This isn't very big. It's like, it's 8 by 10 or under, right? So it's 8 by 10 or under. So this is greatly magnified, like with the other ones, it's magnified. So that's loose. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I wanted to make it smaller. So you can see like this is a big brush right here. That's a big brush, right? This down here, the foreground is a big brush. And I think that with this foreground, this is not white paint. This is transparent and showing the board through. So the whites that you see here are transparent, showing the board. That's transparent, showing the board. I think the background, I think the sky is transparent, showing the board. I don't see paint, white paint, like this is transparent. I think this is all transparent. You can see that I've kind of gone over, you know. I think, I don't have the original anymore. I think it looks like I probably went over with some white, but there's a lot of board showing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not, you know, if it works, basically, if you like it, like that's white. I probably, you know, went vertically with these vertical strokes with transparent white. If you like it and it's working, it can be transparent, right? You don't have to go, oh God, it can't be transparent. It has to be opaque. So you see how loose and sketchy it is. And, you know, I like that quality in some of the loose pieces. And see, for me, I can work really tight and controlled. And sometimes it's actually more of a challenge for me to be loose and uncontrolled.
Yeah.
And so I try to cultivate that these days because I can do the tight controlled thing. And it's more of a challenge for me to be loose. And so that's why I actually cultivate the looseness a lot. Right. So this piece again, similarly, there's a lot of white in this piece that's just the like particularly around the edge. I think that this was framed with the edge showing because we liked the edge. Some of this is probably white paint, like that's a brush stroke of white. So this is probably white, but the edge is definitely the white of the board. Obviously, this is a white, and you can see how adding the white cools the mixture here on the wall back here. And I've brushed some of the cools back here over the green bushes to make them recede into the background. So you can see my brush strokes here. I think that, I mean, even for myself, when I look at the paintings like this is white. You know, I've taken white and brushed it over, and also here. But there's also some, you know, if it's transparent and the whiteboard is showing through and it works, I don't bother it, right? But I'll add white if I need to. Even when I look at my own work like this, and I think, God, it looks like so intentional and planned and obvious. But I know that when I painted it, it was not, you know, it wasn't, I was, you know, groping my way through it, right? Trying to, you know, just following the thread. And it's not something that's pre-planned. I didn't actually know. I don't always, I usually don't know ahead of time what kind of decisions I'm going to have to make. So I think that people, students, right, make I'm going to say the mistake of thinking that just because somebody's done a lot of paintings like me, and has a certain level of education, that they always have everything pre-planned out, and that everything goes according to plan, and that that's a mark of a, I'm going to say, better artist or a more accomplished painter artist. And the fact is that that's actually not the case. You're always sort of a little bit lost going through, you know, trying to figure out what's going to work in a painting, and trying to get the whole piece to work the way you want it, in a way that you recognize as being, you know, what you want, I'm going to say. And if you are challenging yourself, then you're always a little bit lost going through it. And if you want to just paint the same piece over and over, that's pretty boring. And you're kind of phoning it in if you're doing that. Here's another piece. You can kind of see the big brush strokes back here with the big brush, and the crappy old brush that splits, right, and creates these lines. So I think this right here is the board coming through these. I think this is just sort of my sketch, and then I left it because I couldn't improve on it using white. But like here, you can see where I've come in with the white. Yeah. And I tend to like these brush strokes. I like how they create these sort of swirly shadows. So here. And these pieces, again, they're not very big. They're in the 8 by 10-ish range, right? 9 by 12, 8 by 10. Maybe a bigger piece is 11 by 14. But I find I've done bigger gouache paintings, and I find that it's just really hard because to paint a bigger painting with gouache, you start to have to be able to control the spaces that are not active. And it gets very difficult, harder in a bigger painting. So that's why gouache sort of lends itself to smaller pieces, for me anyway. There. So you can see how much I've used white down here, right? Lots of big blobby white strokes. So I think that might be most of the pieces that I pulled out. Oh wait, there should be. There we go. This is an old piece, a sketch that I did in preparation for a portrait. Here. And it's not very big. It's 7 by 9, maybe. So but you can see how loose it is, right, in here, and the brush strokes. That I like to use the brush strokes to create form if I can, and but later on, I've gotten tighter and uptight. The case. Like, let's see if I can open, what did I have here? Well, I don't have an example of my tighter pieces because I actually don't prefer the tighter pieces. I could go back here. Well, no, I can't. I just have these open on my desktop, and I can't really go. Wait. They're down here. Okay. I had a tighter piece. This piece is tighter, and in some places, and not that piece. Or, okay. You can see here that I'm controlling the paint more. And so the background, and this is a small piece. So this is 8 by 10, maybe. But you can see the texture of the paint in the background, but it's not as obvious, right? Coming down here, you can see the brush strokes, but they're not as obvious. You can see how tight I'm being here, right? So I'm using a little bit more of that cross hatching that I showed you guys, and I'm much tighter about, the edges of the forelock here and these little whiskers, and how I'm rendering his mane. And, her shirt, right? Much more noodly about the details, I think this painting works, but I'm just saying that I'm much more tight and refined. There's a lot more subtleties. I'm really controlling the paint more. And And it's more of a challenge for me to work the other way, frankly, to work looser. It's easier for me to work this way. I like this piece, but I also like the other pieces, and I know it's more of a challenge. So, so some of what I've been showing you with the tight little brush strokes, that's one way that you can control the paint. Depends on what you want to do. All right, let's see what we got here. All right. So I'm going to stop the share there. And we're going to refine this. I'm going to refine this piece a little bit that we've been working on. So let me go to my Nikon. There we are. I think that this is looking a little bit like there's too much light. Let me see how it looks if I turn off there. That's really closer. It's kind of hard to get the light exactly right. But with the bright lights on it, it was looking too, I'm going to say overexposed.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's kind of a dark day outside. So, and that actually makes a big difference. So I'm still working with my old way of working, which is I'm wetting down, you know, the piles on my palette, and I'm putting out more paint when I need it. Let me start my Nikon recording. There we go. Okay, so recording on my Nikon also. I'll start this timer. All right. Meow. Hi, kitty.
You want to say hi?
I've also got my iPhone here. So if you need a closer view, if I zoom in, then you can use the the iPhone view of the palette. And I might zoom in at some point if I'm starting to work on her face, show you how we can tighten things up. Now, I think you can see when I put the photo up next to the painting that the values in the photo, and this printout is on coated paper, you know, because I'm an artist and my husband's a designer, so we have stuff like coated paper around for our printer, and you can kind of see how shiny it is. That's the kind of the coat on the paper. And coated paper is nice because it doesn't soak up the ink in the printer. The ink sits on top, and so therefore you get darker, more snappy details and snappy colors and snappy values, more so than if you use your regular printer paper and it kind of sucks up the ink. And so I've got some nice snappy values here, and you can see how gouache doesn't get those darks.
Mm.
You know, I might be able to use dioxazine violet, you know, which is very dark, and, you know, neutralize it a little bit, maybe with something like the perline, maybe with some Windsor green or phthalo green, the dark phthalo green and perline, and then the dioxazine. And maybe I might be able to make it a little bit darker than this, but not a lot darker. It's not going to be a ton darker. So
Do you specifically not use like black, like lamp black or whatever?
yeah, I avoid using blacks, and part of that is just, I suppose, leftover stigma from when I was in school, because I almost always mix
Right. Yeah.
a black that is tilted maybe warm or tilted maybe cool.
Hmm.
And then ivory black or lamp black, it has its uses. And some people always have it on their palette, and it does have its uses. I try to discourage my students from using it initially because people usually have I'm going to say the habit or, their idea of mixing color is that in order to get a darker color, you add black to it.
Right, right.
And so a lot of times I say, please don't use black because I want people to darken their colors a different way. And then down the road, if they want to put black on their palette, but they know how to mix their colors, then they can. And I've used black in certain situations, but generally I don't have it on my palette. And I just want my students to learn to use their dark colors to make darks and even mix a black.
Yeah,
right.
That makes sense. That is a good.
So, if you want to have black on your palette, you can. But that's the reason why I don't have it on my color list for the class.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm looking at my painting and I'd like to, let's see, I would probably darken here to push this background back behind her, like it is here. See how dark it is? I would get it darker closer to this, right? I might put a few details back here, just a little, just a tiny bit. I don't want to draw the viewer's attention back here, but there's a little bit of that stuff here that could make it look more like leaves. I might make a decision about these grays. Do I want them or do I not? Because, this doesn't really make sense in the photo. And sometimes when something doesn't make sense in the photo, it really looks odd in the painting. So I can make a decision about that. And then similarly here, I can put in maybe some details that make this look more like leaves. I can look at my painting and decide, do I want this to be as intense a green? Is it distracting? Do I want to darken this a little bit? I've got these pretty intense greens here. Do I want to darken this a little bit? If I look at my photo, sometimes it's enlightening, but the photo is really, this is actually lighter. It's intense and it's lighter. So it actually is pretty strong. So then I just decide, well, what do I want? If this is this strong here, is it working here on the photo because of all this detail? Right? Judgment call, right? But those are the questions that run through my mind. And probably I will do something here that I feel works for the painting, and it might be working differently in the photo, right? And I'll depart from the photo. I'd like to refine her face a bit. I could put some indication of hair, her curls, because it's really subtle here. And you can't really see it, can you? I mean, as I get closer, then I lose focus, but like I can see it, but the camera's not picking it up, right? That there's like the subtle curls. The thing is that it can be distracting if you put those kind of picky little things in, and maybe I'm going to leave this as a shape. So I can decide whether to put in these diamonds on the pattern on her shirt. I might do that. So in order to separate her from the background, I might put in some details like the diamond pattern, maybe some of the whites, the little white stripies. So those are things that I might do here. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I might need to turn on a light in order to get enough light, because you can see, like, as I zoom in, my camera needs more light as I zoom in. Here. Let's see. Come on. See if this is better. Yeah, that's a little bit better. What if I do this? If I zoom in, my camera needs more light. So you can see, let's see, closer, maybe. Just gonna bump this over so you can see. Gotta make some adjustments in my setup there, and there we go. Yeah. There. So when I'm talking about making some, refinements, I think you can probably see the difference between that and this. And I can get this to be closer to the photo. I can get it to look less like a graphic novel, which I feel like it looks a little bit like a graphic novel right now. I've been very broad with my highlights. And I can, if I want to get this painting to look more like the photo, and refine some of this, then I will probably come here and put in some of the diamond pattern, some of these little details to make the shirt, to draw the viewer's eye to the shirt. So if I put in detail into an area, I draw the viewer's eye, and I also bring that area forward, so to speak. The background gets pushed back by being more vague. The things that are in the foreground, by making finer details, they come forward. All right, so I'm going to sharpen up some of my highlights, maybe refine the shapes of them. Looking here, I feel like she's got kind of a bulgy cheek here. Maybe I'll refine that. And I can, if I decide to, I can come into her eye and I can put in upper lid. What I find is this, pull this thing over here. I find that it's risky to put in this kind of upper lid fold here because it's so difficult to get the shape exactly right. It really has to follow the shape of the eye. And so it's easy to get it wrong. It can be more fiddly than it's worth, and it often doesn't really add that much. Mm. And so I will tend to avoid that kind of thing if I can. So let's see, where am I going to start? I'm going to start by refining some of the shapes here based on my photo, and I can make this piece a little bit closer to the photo. I wish I could easily have the photo in the frame. Over there. And by doing this, I have to kind of phone there. And I don't know if I can still get the photo in the frame. I kind of can't. So I'm sorry, because it would be really helpful for you to see the photo at the same time. Maybe that's something I have to figure out. Some fancy techie footwork that I have to figure out for future classes and future videos. All right. I'm evaluating how picky I want to get, but sometimes when I get too picky, I go, well, that's not better. How do I go back? And then sometimes you can go back and sometimes you can't. Usually you have to repaint it. So I picked up this brown color. It's a little bit neutralized. It's sort of dark like this, like the shadow color on the photo, and I'm just going to refine. So this is sort of picky, right? Picky. But if you do want to know how to make a more refined piece, if you have this kind of control, then it can help you refine areas that you want to refine and leave other areas. So it's good skill to have, how to get picky and do the cross hatching and refine shapes. Let's see here, not too much, just really a little bit of refining. And that I do like I do like the broader, the brush strokes, the personality of the brush strokes.
Mhm.
So I'm just sort of checking my shapes with, I'm using my brush, so to speak, to check the shapes. Again, similar to the fold over the eyes, the fold under the eyes, you want to be kind of understated, because if you aren't careful, you'll make them look like a raccoon, or you'll make them look older than they are. And so if I were to put in this fold up here, I would do this. I would, I'm taking my risk. I'm taking a risk here of doing this. I would make it, I'm kind of making my mixture more transparent. I add a little bit water to my mixture. I don't want this fold to be really dark, because it's going to age my subject. And I'm leaving the area where the highlight is. I'm not drawing this line across the highlight, even if I see it in the photo. So I'm leaving it. And now I've got this transparent mixture, and I'm going to come over here. I said I wasn't going to do this, but if we're going to get picky, and then I'm going to. Again, here, I'm not drawing the line across the highlight, because if I do that, even if I see it in the photo, it's going to reduce my illusion of form, that I'm trying to create. It's going to work against me, work against my illusion of form. Here, just make a little bit more. I'm using a really watery mixture. I'm making a little bit more shadow, kind of a form shadow on her lid. Moving out this, there we go. Okay. So I'm not doing too much. If I want, I can come in here and refine the white of her eye. I want to play with like where she's looking, but I really don't want to get too into this. So now I'm going to take some white. If I have to put out new white, but for the moment, I'm just going to use what I have on my palette. And so I can kind of sculpt these highlights and make them more interesting than I already have. So one of the things that makes this look a little bit, let's see, it makes my face not have very much character, where this face actually does have character, is that these highlights that I've made are too like. You see how they're sort of all the same shape and size, okay? And so I can make this more interesting by varying the shapes of the highlights. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this highlight here and I'm going to make it less, because in this photo, that highlight isn't as strong. So I can take sort of this warm color, make that highlight less. Let's see. Got this orange. I don't want it to be too orange, so I'm putting a little brown in it. Kind of a dry brush kind of a thing, and I'm just gonna make this highlight not as generic looking. So I'm really putting my thought process into words here, and there's always the chance and even the likelihood that I'm wrong about some of the decisions that I make. Happens all the time. I still blow it. I still make mistakes and go, oh well, that's not working out. I have to take a more careful look at what I'm trying to do. So I'm heightening my highlight in some spots, and I just want to make things more interesting. So I added a little bit more highlight to her eyelids to draw the viewer's eye, sort of sharpen that up. Now this highlight here on the bridge of her nose, right, basically between her eyes, I want to refine that and make it not such a blob, right? Not such a boring round shape, but shape it a little bit more like my photo. So my photo has more nuances in the shape. It's more to one side than the other. It has softer edges around here. It's a little bit longer than it is here. And has a little tiny lighter highlight in the middle. So I want to pay attention to those nuances and see if I can reflect them. So close observation, right? We're doing some close observation. We're making much of some of these details. And the thing is that with portraiture, and this isn't, nobody's hired me to do this painting. These kind of the tiny little details can be very, very important. So I guess I'm drawing on my background as a portrait painter. All right, picking up some white. And I think we used yellow into this. And I'm looking at this highlight thinking, do I need to use yellow? So I'm going to come in here and put this little, and it's pretty strong. So if I look at this, I go, wow, that's pretty sharp. And I look at my photo and it's not as, so it's more diffused here. I go, okay, let's see, I can take this and I can kind of spread it around. I'm kind of reactivating what's underneath. So if I make a mistake like this, there's a couple things I can do. I can mix all my colors and paint over it. Or what I did here was I went in with a wet brush and I kind of diffused that. Then I'm going to take some yellow and play around with this to get it closer to what I see. And in doing so, I might make some mistakes. Oh, okay, that might have been a mistake. So I think you can see that I'm testing some colors, right? We talked about that. I'm going, that's not what I want. That's not what I want. How can I get closer to what I want? And so it's not always quick and easy, right? Or obvious. I'm using a warmer color here because I need some warms surrounding this on my surrounding the highlight on my photo. So I play around to try to get things as close as I can. Sometimes I get into trouble and I make things worse. And then usually I have to salvage, you know. I'm picking up some more warm, some reds and some oranges. Put in the warms on this side of her nose, right? Because they're warmer in the photo here. And now that I'm kind of doing nuances, I can observe that and go, I'm going to warm this up. So now I've got her nose much warmer. Look at my photo. So what I see is that I made her nose much warmer. And now I need to come back in over here and put in some form, like some darker colors on the side of her nose. So I can, I make a mistake, or I make things, dubious, and maybe they're not really obviously better, and then I have to make some adjustment. Just so you know that plenty of times I make things work. Okay. Now I could come in here and make darks in here because in the photo you can see her nostrils, but I don't want to emphasize her nostrils because in a painting, sometimes just because something works in a photo doesn't mean it's going to work in a painting. And in my experience, when I make these nostrils more darker and call it more attention to them, it's not a good thing to do. It's risky. So I'm going to move on down here and kind of sculpt these shapes a bit more. Giving some adjustments to the shapes. So here I came in with a dark right here, and I feel like it made too much of a line. So now I need to come over and pick up a warm orange, like this color, and cover this line because it's too, it's not making making things look like form, like a graphic line. So this is a little bit picky, and you can make it, it can be as picky as you want, or, you know, I could have easily just left it. Putting some, I've got some yellow on my brush here. Adding some yellow to my warm, because I like how warm it is in this photo. We've got yellow here on the edge. I'm trying to put that there. We've got yellows in her nose, on her nose rather, or however you want to put it. Some yellows in here. Where I see yellows, I'm taking my brush and I'm putting a little yellow glow in. And I'm using cross hatching. Now I've got this complex area of her lips, and I can decide how much of this to put in. So I'm looking at my photo. She's got these really, really sensual lips. There's a highlight here of her upper lip that's above the edge of her upper lip. I'm going to say this is like, I don't even know what you call this. I really should look this up. This area right under your nose, between your nose and your lips, this area here. She has a highlight here, and then she's got this harder highlight on the lips. She has these pillows here. And that's all very complex, and I'm looking at my painting and thinking, how much of that do I want to put there? Because I think sometimes less is better. So I have on my painting, I've got this highlight that I dropped in. I kept it pretty simple. So I'm going to refine that. I've decided I'm going to refine that the shape of that highlight. I've got a darker color on my brush, a warm dark. And I'm going to just make this highlight give it more of an edge. I'm going to restart my Nikon on just a second. Probably going to bump a few things while I do this. So by just doing a few things, I feel like I've made this more interesting than it was. Altering the shape of the highlights, which I thought were too light, right? Too general and generic, and they looked together too much. They were the same shape, same size. I'm bringing a little bit more of a highlight here on her nose. But I still want to keep things from being too much the same. I want to keep things interesting if I can. So now I'm coming down here and continuing work on her lips. And I'm feeling my way. I'm kind of I'm going, I wonder if it would be better if I, how much should I do? Because I can't, it's not necessarily a better painting. I make it look more like photo. Because a photo is a photo. We're using the photo as a jumping off point for our own expression, and we're keeping what serves, our vision, right? And we're not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily make a better painting if it's closer to the photo. So our decision making, what am I doing here? I've got my mouth working and I don't necessarily know what I'm doing. Our decision making, we want to use the photo as inspiration, but not necessarily have everything be just like the photo. And in some ways, if we make things just like the photo, it's so much work if we were to do that, and it's not necessarily going to pay off. I'm putting in a little bit more of the shape of her lips here. I can see my photo. And the shape of her lips over here. Go over this a few times to get the right value. A little more white. And I'm going to see, because I can do something and decide whether it works and then fix it. That's one of the beauties, right, of gouache. So I'm going to see if I can put in a suggestion of these pillows on her lips. I already have a little suggestion of the pillow here on this side. So I want a suggestion of the pillow over here. So I'm talking about these two shapes on her lips. And she has beautiful lips. And I'd like to I'd like to do justice to her lips. So I'm picking up some of this salmon pink. Now, we want to do justice to her features, but we don't want to make them look cartoony or exaggerated. And so it's easy when you're working from a photo to, by being faithful to the photo, that something doesn't work on the painting that works on the photo. So I'm going to adjust the shape of her lips that I have here. I need to bring this up. Let's see, what do I need? I need a dark color here. See if this is dark enough. But I am leaving the things that I like. So I started this with these loose brush strokes, and I'm not necessarily, I'm leaving those intact. I'm not repainting this whole thing. I'm leaving the loose brush strokes that I like intact. And then I'm tightening up the details and varying the shapes of the highlights and refining some of the shapes in here, but I'm not repainting these loose tones that I actually like. That would just be, so learning to recognize what's working and leave it in place as something that's good. Putting in this corner of her mouth, which I like. I mean, these are really nice shapes here. There. Might have gotten this a little too low, so I might have to come in and adjust that. This one looks pretty good here. So if I want to adjust this corner of her mouth, I've got it brought a little too low. I'm just using a wet brush and moving the paint. And now I see I don't really have a light under here to reveal that layer. So I'm going to have to put in a little bit of light. Not too much, hopefully, just a little here. So right now, I'm looking at this. She's at an angle on my painting, right? She's at an angle on the photo, right? So her face is at an angle. Sometimes I have to turn my head and try to look at her so that she's straight on to see whether I'm making things too slanted, if I need to adjust, because it's really natural for us as humans our brain wants to straighten. So she's at an angle like this. I need for her features to be all oriented toward this midline. So if I'm looking at her at this angle, I will tend to, as will most people, like I'm checking to see if this corner of her mouth is too low, because I might have the natural tendency to turn her features so that they are straight on to me. And so so I can check, I go, okay, I'm looking at my photo, I'm looking at just to check, and I might need to raise this and lower this just a little bit, sort of check my natural tendency, right? Lower that, raise this, and it's very likely that I had this correct in the first place. And so I thought I needed to make a change and lower that corner of the mouth, and probably I was wrong. Happens to me all the time. Now I'm going to check similarly to see if I need to widen the mouth at all. How is it oriented? How well is it oriented to the midline of her face? Looking at the photo. And I can also make the corners of her mouth darker. They're slightly lighter in value than her eyes. And unlike her nostrils, I don't hesitate to emphasize the corners of her mouth because they're a beautiful thing. And so, whereas I hesitate to emphasize her nostrils, I don't hesitate to emphasize the corners of her mouth. So I've made it dark. Looks like I'm using the Perling Violet, and you could use Perling Maroon if that's what you have, and I'm mixing it with this phthalo, this dark phthalo green, that's Windsor green, to make a dark. And I want it to be a little bit, not too watery. So let me come in here and see if I can darken the corners of her mouth judiciously. Even bring it up into here and darken here. And this is pretty much as dark as it gets with gouache. So I'm not gonna be able to approach how dark the photo is. Now I'd like to check, I want to check these shapes down here. So I'm looking at her lower lip. She's got this highlight. I'm going to refine that a little bit. I'm going to refine the shape of this shadow under her lower lip. And then I wanted to adjust this edge here of her cheek so that she doesn't look like she's got, you know, mumps over here. And I'm always thinking to myself, am I improving things? Do I really need to go in there and fix that? Looks like I got a little bit of white on here, so I'm going to have to fix that. Happens to me a lot where I actually, you know, I actually do stuff by mistake that then I have to go and fix. So now I have to go fix that. I'm going to drop this. I have a warm rust red I'm going to drop over there. So I got this on there because I got white paint on my hand here from working with my palette, you know. So anyway, happens to the best of us, I guess. Now I'm picking up a dark so that I can make this look like it never happened. I hope. Try to make it look like it never happened. And I'm going to have to kind of go back and forth to make it look like it never happened. So she doesn't look like she's got, you know, again, the mumps over here. Don't want her to look like that. So letting it dry in between here so that I can make a judgment. That might be. Be close to good enough. Hopefully it's close to good enough. There we go. So I'm looking at my lower lip. Now I can see just the whisper of a couple teeth in the photo, but I am leery of putting teeth in. If you draw too much attention to teeth, it can look really, really wrong. First, I'm going to take some dark and I'm going to run it across here. If you do put in teeth, you want it to just be a suggestion so that it doesn't look, it can look really strange if you outline all the teeth and are too detailed about it. So I'm picking up a light, but it's not that light. Let's see. So I can try putting in just the whisper of teeth. And see if I like it. And then if I don't like it, I can make it go away. And this is how you learn too. You try stuff, and then if you don't like it, you say, well, that doesn't work. Then you go, okay, well, how do I fix it? How do I get rid of it? How do I go back to what it was? All right, so I want to pick up a little bit more of this pink that's outlining the edge of this highlight on her lip. And I'm not going to go into these little tiny indications of the lip wrinkles, like the texture of her lips, because that's going to be too much information and it's going to look too exaggerated. So I'm going to generalize over that. This is where, you know, I don't want to put in everything that I see in a photo because it's not going to be, some things are not going to be helpful. I just want a little bit more of this edge of pink, and my pink might be too light and I might need to make an adjustment here. Yeah, I need it to be darker here. And sometimes like I'll do this and I'll go, okay, that's darker, but it's too intense. Do I like it? I think it's too light. So now I have to adjust it again. So Lauren, this is what we were talking about earlier in the class, right? That I have to adjust things multiple times. Let's see, I'm going to neutralize this a little bit using this rust color. I can, you know, I can always go back in again. I can, if I need to. There. That's a little better. So let's see, I've got this rosy color here. I'm going to put a little bit more. I'm going to sculpt this just a tiny bit on the side here. And then I'm looking at my highlight. Do I want to make a change in the shape? Looking at my photo, I see that my photo, not only is the highlight lighter, so there's more emphasis on the highlight on the lips, but it's kind of a shape of a triangle here as it shows us the shape of her lips. And so I don't really have that. I have this skinny highlight because I adjusted the shape of, you know, I added some pink red up here. So I want to now adjust the shape of the highlight again. I'm going to be bringing it down a little into this triangle. So, and then you know what? If I don't like it, I go, oh, that doesn't work. Then fix it. If I get the shape a little wrong, which I did, I got it a little bit wrong, I'm going to just adjust it. Yeah. And come over here and just sculpt it where I want it to be sculpted. There. And now I want to, let's see, what do I want to do? I'm going to adjust the shape of it again. Whoops. Almost got some more white onto my painting, so this is this is the danger. I'm going to bring this across a little bit. Come on, honey, there we go. That. And now I can hit it a little bit harder. I got the shape of it about where I want it. I'm picking up a little bit more white. Let's see. A little bit more flow with my white. And if I get it too white, then I can always adjust it. It looks to me like I've got my white a little too cool. So now you can see that it's so white and bright that it doesn't really relate. So now I need to adjust it again. So adjust, adjust, adjust. That's kind of how it works. Let's see, I need this red pink again here, and I'm going to soften some areas. I've got it a little bit more orange in it right now. And then let it dry. I can decide if I want it to be this bright. So I go back and forth until I get what I want or what I think is going to be better. And sometimes I change what I think is going to be better. Let's see. And now I feel like it's still too cool compared to these other highlights. So I'm going to use a little bit of yellow, transparent, orangey yellow. And if I put some down and I think it needs more than I put down, then I'll come again. Here. There we go. There, so that makes it agree a little bit more with these other highlights. And then if I want to brighten it, I can brighten it. So, you know, there's all these adjustments. Let's see. Sometimes I just leave it and I go off and do something else and then decide later whether I want to adjust it again. I'm getting into trouble again. I'm putting my little finger down on something on my palette and getting white on it. Okay. So I'm going to leave it for now, and then later on I might come back and go, oh, this is what it needs. I said I was going to leave it, but now I'm like, no, I need to do this thing here and this thing here. All right, so now I want to refine this shadow under the lower lip. The shadow is going to help show us the shape of the lower lip. And from there, I can refine this lower lip if I want to later on. I feel like, oh, now I see what I need to do. So I'm picking up some of this warm color brown, sort of a mixture of Perlene maroon and this Windsor green again. And I'm going to adjust the shape of the lower lip. And I might, you know, come in too tight and I might have to make another adjustment. See, so adjustment, adjustment, adjustment. I go, oh, I came in too tight. I'm using a wet brush to kind of soften and remove some paint there. And going, okay, then I need to have another go at this. Soften, soften. There we go. That's better. And don't want her to look like she's got a tooth, you know, swollen cheek from having a toothache or something, an infection. So I need to smooth out this here. So one thing that I found in my painting experiences is that if I refine too much, I get things too picky and exact, then it will create the need for me to refine everything else about the painting too much. So if I were to get this portrait of her to be too tight and perfectly refined, it would start to require the necessity of me getting tight and refined with her shirt and tight and refined elsewhere on the painting. So I want to be careful about how tight and refined I get in here. And that's one reason for starting the painting really loosely. And I'm leaving a lot of that brush stroke looseness. And then I'm coming in really, really judiciously and refining certain things, clarifying some things, but not trying to make things perfect and perfectly like the photo. Because if I do that, then I'm going to have to get all tight and picky about the shirt. And I really don't want to. I'm just, don't want to get tight and picky about all this. So I'm going to have a similar approach to the shirt where I'm going to do a few details and try to leave the loose brushiness that I like in place while clarifying a few details. And this is something that you'll get better at judging as you make mistakes, as you get more experience and you make mistakes and you go, oh, I learned from that mistake. I don't want to just go in there and make everything super tight because then I'm going to have to render that darn shirt and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to move, like this right here is actually an earring, right? These two lights. It's not that important to get them exact. They're sort of tassel earrings is what they are. But I'm going to move, I have this here, it's showing me the edge of her cheek. And so I want to move this in so that it defines the edge of this cheek also. So again, so that her cheek doesn't look like she's got the mumps or swollen. It might not be that important, but sometimes it's a hard call. All right, I figured out where I'm picking up the white paint. It's from my bucket. So let's see. I need something a little cooler, not pure white, but it's sort of a gray-green-ish thing. Gray-greenish color. Here. And it's muted. It's not, So I'm going to just actually even make this less. Warm it up a little bit more. Too cool? Need a little bit more of a warm up. There. That's better. And uh-oh. All right, I'm going to restart my video here. Okay. So I'm using this lighter colored earring, tassel earring, to show the viewer where the edge of her cheek is, on basically on both sides, but particularly on this side. Too. I can see my stripes showing through here, so I want to obliterate that a little bit more so that it's not confusing. That's better. A little bit warmer again. I'm getting too cool. There. Now I'm looking here and going, okay, I move this over. It's defining the edge of the cheek. I feel like it's a little too dark right here. And the reason that I feel that way is because it's catching my eye too much. So this light against this edge of her cheek is a little too distracting, and I feel like I want that tension here in the middle of her face, and I don't want it over here on the edge of her cheek. I just want the edge of her cheek to be there where it's supposed to be. But I don't want to distract the viewer. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lighten this dark just a little so that it's more of a gray against this brown, not such a large contrast like that. Just not have it be distracting so that we, as the viewer, we keep our eyes on the main. And what I want to do too is warm up this chin and refine this chin highlight because it's just a little too much of a light block. Now that I've gone in and refined the shapes here, up here, this looks just like a chunk, like a light colored chunk. And I want to put some these warm oranges around this light highlight and refine it a little bit like I did up here. So as I said, I refine this and then I need to refine that because suddenly it doesn't really make sense anymore in the context. So I'm picking up some more orange like here to put around this and sort of checking the shape. She has a cleft in her chin, which is very charming. I like the cleft. I like clefted chins, including on women. I think they're pretty cool. So I don't have one myself. So now I'm asking myself, how light do I want this to be? Do I want it to be as light and cool as it is? And the answer is maybe not. So I'm gonna make it warmer with I'm taking just a little bit of warm paint that's not very thick onto my brush and it's pretty dry, and I'm just gonna lay it over that to make it less, not as bright, not as sharp, not as distracting. You can see the cleft in her chin here. I could refine this more if I wanted to get even more picky. Just bring this over here. All right. And now what I'm going to do is soften this top edge. Let's see. I'm going to pick up a little bit of a warmer light color again, just a little bit of it here. And always overdo it, and then sometimes I have to So I softened the top edge of that highlight so it's not distracting, but it's too cool. So I'm going to warm it up again with some transparent type of orange mixture. That's starting to work better for me. All right, there. Okay, so let's see, how are we doing on time? We've got about 15 minutes left. So that's how long this stuff takes. I would probably darken this edge of her cheek so that it folds back better right here. I would refine this part of her neck because in the photo I see violets in here, right? So I would refine this. And then I'd probably come into the shirt and put in some of these smaller details, on these little white stripes, because they're sort of like eye candy and they direct the eye around. They give the eye, nice details to look at. And people will look at the details, the viewer will look at the details, and it'll move the eye around the painting. So that's one of the nice things about this kind of detail pattern. that it will move the eye around the painting. So that's what I would be doing first. I would be resolving this and putting in these. But today I'm going to skip this right now, and I'm going to put in some of this detail and see how I like it. So I'm going to use, I can use a dark like I've got in here. In the photo, the detail is actually a violet. I can do that, like a dark violet. Let's just see. So I'm going to start with my dark, which is this Windsor violet. Windsor green, which is phthalo. And I can put in this Windsor violet, which is dioxazine. The problem is if I do that, it might get too dark because that is really a dark color. Oh, there, I've got some in there anyway. I got some of that Windsor violet into my mixture anyway, just by proximity. Okay, so I'm making a dark. This is actually kind of a warm dark with perline maroon and the Windsor violet in it. Let's see how this looks. And I don't have to be very particular. What one of the phenomenons as people, as humans, when we look at a lot of detail, is that our mind will tend to group it. And so it'll fill in. So if it sees a crowd of people and the people in front are more detailed, and then the people toward the back can be very, very, very not detailed, much more cursory, because our mind will just fill in the details once it sees the people in front. It just goes, oh, those are people. I'm just going to fill this all in. So we can use that tendency as artists so that we don't have to be really, really exact when we paint things like this. And it's in fact much more fun for the viewer if we're not, because their eye will finish it. And that is fun for the viewer. They participate. So I'm not worrying too much about being perfect and exact here. That would in fact be, it would drive me crazy, and it might drive a viewer crazy too. In fact, I'm getting a little messed up here, and it doesn't really matter. I'm going, okay, I want my eye to hang up on this, and then I want it to move over here. So I'm going to darken a little bit of this here so that my eye will go, oh, from here to here. It'll follow these darks. There. And now, just keep on moving here. Move those darks around. Already getting a little sloppy. I'm already losing my focus on doing these diamonds. And if I need to, I can come back in and I can finesse that. If I get sloppy and it's too sloppy, I can come back in and I can finesse that. And one thing that I will tend to do is, if I've got that the viewer will get stuck if they get trapped in these closed forms. So I can come in and go, well, I don't really want to have this be all these closed forms and trap my viewer. So I'm going to just open them up. these are already open because they're not fully formed. They're partly obscured, and so I'm going to just open these so that I don't have closed forms. There we go. Just don't trap your viewer here. There we go. Okay, about 10 more minutes here. We're on the clock. We're on the clock. Okay. And now I am starting to just avoid making my forms too closed so that I don't have to go back and fix it, or I'll go back and fix it less. So I'm just going to go, well, I'm just going to make my forms not as closed, and then I don't have the problem, people getting stuck. Just a few more to do. I'm just going to come up here and do a little bit there. And here, there's a little bit there. Not all of the yellows have these zigzag patterns here. So the next thing would be the neck here so that it will flow into her face here, so that this would make a unit. And I would probably come down and refine her midriff. Oh, that's what we used to call it, your midriff, when I was in school. We weren't allowed to have our midriff showing, and if they did, girls got busted and sent home. And then when they finally allowed us to have our midriff showing, because, you know, of course it would be terribly, terribly corrupt to have your midriff showing. When they finally allowed us to have the midriff showing, it was a really big deal. So I would come down here and I would basically refine, you know, her flesh tone so that it all works together, and then decide about the background and about, you know, refine the top of her jeans here and her arm. Because if I've got this all grabbing the viewer's attention here, and that's refined, then I will know how much to do back here, because if the viewer's attention is here, I might not need to do very much back here if this is keeping the viewer's attention in the foreground. All right, so I am done for today on this, but I'm hoping that you can see the difference that we made here in the face by refining those shapes and just doing enough, but leaving this brushy, loose brushwork here as being something that we want to retain, so that the piece doesn't look too overworked and too stodgy, So Lauren, you got any questions?
Oh, I was going to ask, so with your tracing.
Oh yeah, your tracing paper question.
Yeah, just, what, so basically it kind of looked like, from looking at your tracing of this picture, you were sort of tracing like almost values or like highlights a little bit more so than, because I feel like when I was younger, I liked to draw a lot, and a lot of drawing is very much like tracing the actual shape of the thing. I mean, because, well, I guess when you're really drawing just not like, you're not tracing something.
You might be drawing the structure. Are you saying drawing the structure? Okay.
So is that what you
You
kind of go
can.
for, like in the face area?
You can, yes. So if I'm using tracing paper, it's obscuring some of the detail,
Mm-hmm.
and um, I can't always discern in the
Yeah.
dark, particularly. I can't always discern what is what.
Right.
And that's because I can draw, I know I can draw. And so when I'm tracing, I might not stress over that. I might just draw around the shape of the dark
Mm-hmm.
and draw the other things that I can see, the shapes, and use that information so that when I get around to the painting, I can fill in the darks, the details that I see, whatever the boundaries are, right? Um, because I can draw and I know I can make that judgment. Um, but you can also draw the structure at times. It depends on what you can see through the tracing paper.
Right.
Um, and what's important to you as the painter. I also use acetate. Sorry, I had to think of that word. I use acetate also. You can buy acetate in pads or in rolls at the art supply store. And it comes in like a couple different thicknesses. And it's fine to get the thin acetate because you're really only going to use it for tracing and you're going to use it once. So
Mm-hmm.
I get it on a roll because I do a lot of this stuff. And so I will cut off a piece of the acetate on the roll with the scissors or with an X-Acto knife. And then it doesn't have to be perfect and exact. All it has to do is cover my image. And I'll lay it over my image just like I did the tracing paper, and I'll tape it in place. And then I will use a thin Sharpie marker because the Sharpie is permanent. And it will dry pretty much immediately. And I will use the Sharpie thin tip to trace. And then I can see what's in the shadows. I
Mm.
can see everything because it's
Right.
completely transparent. And that's something that I do. I just didn't want to make you buy acetate, but you certainly can buy acetate. Uh, and the Sharpie, if you use a different kind of marker, you might risk that the marker will smear because it won't be permanent. And
Right.
so it'll smear on the acetate, and then you're like, then it gets on your hands, and then you're smearing it, and you don't have it. You don't have a tracing. So I do recommend those thin, teeny, fine-tipped Sharpie markers. So that will allow you to see into the darks. But basically, I'm generally just putting down landmarks and shapes that help me fill in and refine. And then I can refine the shapes later because I can draw, and you can draw, and you draw too. And so you don't have to have things exact. You can draw the structure if that suits you. There's no rules to it. It's just whatever helps you with your, create the painting with the fewest hiccups. And I consider it getting into trouble if I'm painting and I'm deeply into my painting, and then maybe there's a tricky area that's foreshortened, so it's a weird shape. And then I start to work on it, and I get into a muddle because it doesn't look right. It just never looks right. I go and I do the laundry, and I come back and I see that it still doesn't look right, and I'm going, damn it. And I redraw it and I redraw it, and then I spend hours on it. Now I'm all messed up because I'm focused on it, and it's really probably not. Often it's not an area it's an area that's in the background. It's not the primary. It's not like this. It's like it's the collar, or it's the ear, or it's something over here. It's the hair, and it's in the background, but I'm focused on it. And now I don't have good judgment because I'm all fixated and I'm frustrated. And I really try not to go to these places because it's hard on your confidence. It's hard to get. Um, it's hard to regain your judgment. And sometimes if I don't have a deadline, I will turn that painting to the wall for weeks. I'll just turn it to the wall and go, okay, I just can't.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go off and do this other stuff. And then down the road, I go, oh, and I'll turn it back and I'll go, oh, that's what's wrong with it, and then because I've gotten that distance. But what I try not to do is set myself up for that kind of situation because I've been in that situation a lot
Right.
over the years. And so I dread that situation.
Yeah.
So if I can have a clearer tracing by using acetate, then I'll do that. But I just want to have the guidance to avoid that nasty muddle.
Yeah.
And
My biggest thing.
yeah, I don't feel like that does anybody any good. It doesn't do me any good.
Yeah.
Get that frustrated, and I don't want students to get that frustrated either. And I think it's perfectly fine. There are people who would say, no, you shouldn't trace, you should draw it and all this stuff. And I go, no, I can draw, and I don't need to spend hours doing this and get frustrated, set myself up for these kind of situations where I get something wrong and get frustrated. So I don't see anything wrong with having a tracing. And if you get into a situation where you keep getting something wrong and you lose that judgment, that you put the tracing back over your painting and you match it up and you go, oh, I see that I went wrong here. And now I see that I went wrong there, and I'm going to correct those things because I have my tracing as an aid. And then I can get an answer and avoid all that frustration, because the frustration is just the kind of thing that you might not go back. You might not go back to painting. You might get, that was really frustrating. I don't want to do that. So I don't have a problem having my students use their tracing to fix stuff.
Yeah, that's a good.
Tried. So if you've tried and you're like, I just keep redrawing it, it never looks right to me now because I'm too focused on it, and I'm frustrated. Then I go, great. I don't say great, but I say, fine. Take your tracing, put it over, and see where you went wrong. So that's some advice about tracing. You can draw the structure if that's what you're seeing, and if that's what you think is going to help you with the painting.
Well, yeah, I think I'm trying to see more in like light and shadow and values than, because I do feel like I do tend to get more stiff and picky and outliney, and
yeah,
I want to be able to see in light and shadow and everything versus kind of the stiffer way that I've gotten myself into.
right. So you understand when I was giving you my stream of consciousness here as I was painting, right? This is what I'm thinking, right? I'm thinking about this and I'm thinking about that. And I am thinking about, not having it be so tight that it's not any fun for somebody to look at.
Yeah.
I don't want to answer all the questions for the viewer. And when I start this loosely, then I want to retain some of that looseness because of the freshness of it. So I don't want to paint it all the way, but at the same time, I like this piece better now. I like the face better because it's more interesting when I varied those shapes, right? Instead of having all the highlights be the same kind of blob, I went in and went, I'm going to make this smaller, and I'm going to make this one less, and I'm going to make, I'm going to refine these shapes so that there's a variety of shape. And I talked a little bit about how I want to draw the viewer's eye to this and not to this, right? Not to the cheeks, right? So I'm like, I need the cheeks to be correct, but I need them to be back here and not up here, right? And so therefore, I'm going to reduce the contrast between the cheek and the earring, right? So that the viewer's eye doesn't go there, but it stays in the here. And then I'd also like to finish the neck here because I want to draw the viewer's eye here, right? And then the midriff and the arm. So I want to have there be a relationship in color and treatment between the arm up here, the face, the neck, and the midriff, and it's all her, her skin. So, I'm thinking about those things as I'm painting, and you will, you're going to gain a feel for, going in loosely. What should I tighten up? If you get the sense, and this is basically, I've been doing it a long time, so I'm more sensitive to, oh, that's not working because it's there's too much contrast and my eye is going there. And I'm also sensitive to when something I do works against my efforts to create the illusion of form. So I go, oh, if I make this, the line of the outside of the form too strong, it's going to work against the illusion that the form is turning.
Right.
So, so I've been doing it a long time, so it's more immediate for me to go, oh, oops, I need to soften that, And for you, it's going to be, what's wrong? And what do I do? And then you're going to try some things. Soften it. Make it cooler, make it warmer. Diffuse it. Change the shape, bring it in, push it out. All these things are tools that you can use. Yeah. So did I manage to answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So it's been a pleasure. And we will post this video to the YouTube and send you the link in a few days. And you can review it. Because YouTube, I sent Emily this. Sorry, getting mixed up.
No, totally fine.
I don't get to see you in person, right? You're just this
right.
I said Emily this, that we're going to leave the videos public because we have to leave them public for you to see them. We weren't able to make them private and then send you a link so that only you can see it. And that's sort of stupid and frustrating. But that's what we've encountered. And so I'll leave them public for a couple months for you guys so that you can check them out a few times. I wish I could make them permanently viewable by you.
Yeah.
But I can't.
That's fine.
So, I mean, unless we solve this. So maybe we'll solve it and then I can make them private and then you guys can continue to have access.
Yeah.
Just a techie thing, but it's also consistent with what we found on Zoom in terms of sending out the links to the meeting. I basically have to do it.
Right.
I have to do it manually. And I only discovered that by asking you, did you get that link? So there's not anything that's telling me whether or not you're getting the link to the YouTube or to Zoom. So just a glitchy thing. Maybe it's kind of a, crummy maintenance on their part. So happy to be teaching you. Would be happy to see you again in another class.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot from teaching this because, I teach it and then I go, it would be better if I did it this way, or, if I slowed it down, or if I broke it into smaller pieces, or, So I learn a lot by doing the teaching. And thank you for bearing with me. I think I threw a lot at you guys.
No, it was great. I want to take more classes for sure. So.
Okay. All right. So have a good day. And I'll send you
too.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.